So you want to start investing in Airbnbs, but you have a few questions about what to expect. We're going to give you 10 tips you must follow as a beginner if you want to buy a profitable Airbnb.
We are the Real Estate Robinsons.
What's up, guys? If this is your first time here, I'm Sarah.
I'm Tony.
And we're real estate investors who quit our day jobs by investing in Airbnbs, and we're here to show you how you can do the same.
Now, we've generated a few million bucks in revenue on Airbnb and hosted thousands of guests. And look, we're not saying that to brag, but just to point out that we've learned a thing or two about hosting on Airbnb.
So we've decided to pick 10 of the most important tips for new Airbnb hosts, and we chose tips from 5 different categories.
Category 1 is about market selection, helping you choose the right city to buy that Airbnb in.
Category 2 is about analyzing Airbnbs. What's the right way to go about doing your analysis on a property?
Category 3 is about your listing setup and getting your Airbnb ready for your guests.
Category 4 is about pricing strategies and how to increase revenue for your Airbnb.
And category 5 is all about managing your Airbnb guests.
Our hope is that by watching this video and understanding the 10 tips we share, you'll walk away with more confidence to start investing in Airbnbs yourself.
And if you like more content about investing in Airbnbs, then be sure to subscribe. So let's get started.
The first category we'll focus on is the first step in most new Airbnb investors' journey, and that's choosing the right city to invest in.
And with over 19,000 cities across the United States, it's super easy to get overwhelmed at this step.
Sure.
And honestly, this is the step where so many Airbnb dreams die, because instead of making a decision, people just get stuck in analysis paralysis and never end up taking any action. So we want to give you a few tips to help you actually choose that Airbnb city.
But one huge thing to call out here, choosing the wrong city is the fastest way to derail your Airbnb dreams. Because once you choose the city and you choose the property, you're literally stuck with it until you sell it. You can't just say, well, this city didn't work, and then pick up the Airbnb and move it to a different city.
So nailing the city is an important step. So let's dive into the first 2 tips about market selection. All right, so tip number 1 is to understand the Airbnb regulations. Now, when Airbnb first started, there weren't really many regulations in place. It was such a new thing that it was kind of like the Wild Wild West. Most cities just hadn't really thought about how to regulate Airbnb, so people just kind of did what they wanted.
But as Airbnb investing has become more and more popular, it's really forced cities to decide how exactly they want to regulate Airbnbs. And we've seen regulations show up in tons of different ways. Some cities are flat out banning Airbnbs, and others are just telling you to pay like a $15 business license, and then you're totally fine.
Now, just because you have to worry about Airbnb regulations doesn't mean you should be fearful of it.
Yeah.
And honestly, some level of regulation is actually a good thing, right? Because it keeps out bad apple Airbnb hosts who do dumb things and then give all of us responsible hosts a bad rap.
And we'll link to a video in the description that breaks down our exact strategy for navigating Airbnb regulations. But in a nutshell, you want to invest in cities that are economically dependent on the revenue that's generated by the Airbnb industry. Cities where, if Airbnbs got banned, would face huge negative consequences. You want to invest in cities where the presence of Airbnbs is a win-win for everybody involved.
Now, once you've validated the regulations, it's time for tip number 2, which is to choose a city with growth potential. Now, there are lots of different ways to measure growth, but what we're referring to here is whether or not there's room for revenue growth in a market. And the easiest way that we found to see the revenue trends is by using AirDNA charts on the market. So scroll down to the revenue section, you can clearly see how revenue has changed year over year.
If revenue grows year over year, then you can assume that there's still some room for growth in that market. But if you see revenues declining year over year, you want to really make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into and that the property you're buying is discounted to the point where the revenue declines are still worth it.
Now, if you see a market that's kind of flat year over year, that's not necessarily a bad thing either. Again, you just want to make sure that when you're analyzing the deal, you're not assuming that revenues are going to go up each year after you buy it.
So those were the first 2 tips. We have 8 more to go over with you, and the next 2 are probably the most important tips. So be sure to stick around. But first,
we want to ask you a quick question. Do you feel like you need someone to work with you side by side as you buy that first Airbnb? Someone who's done it plenty of times themselves and can give you the exact process to follow? If you've been thinking about buying that first Airbnb, but you've been stuck in analysis paralysis, then we are here to help. We have a few spots open in our Airbnb mentorship program, Alpha Host Academy. And guys, we'd love to work with you. Inside of Alpha Host, you'll get a mix of one-on-one coaching, community, content, and we'll literally give you the exact process for choosing the right city and analyzing these deals. So if you're interested, book a totally free call with our team by clicking the link in the description of this video.
All right, the next category is all about the numbers and how to analyze Airbnbs correctly.
Much like choosing the right city, really nailing your analysis is important because it's one of the things that you can't really change after you buy the property. We can always add amenities, redesign an Airbnb, or improve how we manage the property, but we cannot change the fact that we may have simply bought a bad deal.
So pay super close attention here because these next two tips could mean the difference between Airbnb profits or a ton of problems.
So tip number 3, do not rely on one of those Airbnb revenue estimator tools when you're trying to actually buy an Airbnb. Guys, those tools aren't meant to give you concrete data for when you're about to buy a property. They're meant to give you like a ballpark number on how a property might perform as an Airbnb, but you cannot buy an Airbnb based on ballpark numbers. You want your analysis to be as exact as possible, and the revenue estimator tools simply will not get you there.
AirDNA has a revenue estimator, and we think Rabu is another site that offers something similar. But guys, those are just the starting points. Take the time and do your own thorough analysis of the Airbnb.
Take the time to find your own comps. Take the time to calculate your own daily rate. Take the time to project your occupancy. Now, if you've never analyzed an Airbnb before, we'll link to a video that we did in the past that walks you through our process for analyzing Airbnb. So check that in the description.
Tip number 4 is to not rely on other Airbnb calendars for your analysis. You may be tempted to find a few Airbnbs that are similar to the ones you're thinking about buying, checking out those Airbnb calendars to see what kind of prices they're charging, and then using those numbers to back into what you should be able to charge with the Airbnb you're analyzing.
But again, guys, this is not the data you want to rely on to make a purchase. It's definitely better than not analyzing at all, but there are two really big problems with this approach. First, is that you're only getting a snapshot of that Airbnb's performance. And what happens if you check the calendar during the busiest season of the year? You're going to think that those sky-high prices are normal when really it only lasts a few weeks. And second, when you look at the calendar for an Airbnb and you see all of those prices that are listed, you have to understand that those prices are aspirational. And what I mean by that is just because an Airbnb has the price of $400 listed for some random Monday night 6 months from now, it doesn't mean that someone will actually pay $400 to book that Airbnb. By the time the date actually rolls around, maybe the price has dropped to $350 or even $300. So you have to heavily discount a lot of those future prices because there's no guarantee that the property will actually get booked at that amount, which is why we prefer to use historical data because those numbers are cold, hard facts.
All right, the next category is all about setting up your Airbnb. The setup is all of those steps you have to take after you buy the property to actually turn it into a functional Airbnb. And honestly, we've seen plenty of Airbnbs that never really reached their full potential because the owners just totally messed up the setup phase. So let's dive into how you can set up your Airbnb for success from the very beginning.
All right, tip number 5 is to hire a professional designer. Now, we're gonna say this in the nicest way possible, guys. Chances are if you're watching this video, you probably suck at designing Airbnbs.
And your wives do too, I promise.
And we're not saying this to be cruel, but only because we've met so many Airbnb hosts who come to us and say, our Airbnb isn't performing well, and then we look at their listing and it's super clear that they DIY'd the design and just didn't do a good job.
Guys, design is one of those things that's best to leave it to the professionals. Think about all the other areas of your life where you hire things out. Maybe you have a maid that cleans your home once a week. Maybe you're feeling sick, you go see a doctor, right? Hell, tons of people aren't even doing their own grocery shopping with options like Instacart. So the point is, if you let someone else buy your groceries for you, why on earth would you skimp on paying someone to professionally design what very well may be one of your biggest investments you make in your life?
You invested several $100,000s to buy the property, but now you want to pinch pennies on paying for professional design. You'd be better off buying a slightly cheaper property than investing the difference into professional design.
Design is more important today than ever before, and really making sure your property stands out and has a design that gets potential guests to stop and click on your listing is so critical to running a profitable Airbnb business.
So hire it out.
Yes.
Guys, there are tons of designers that focus on Airbnb, but if you want to work with our team, head over to therealestaterobinsons.com/design.
They're the best ones, so go check them out.
Tip number 6, focus on amenities and experience. Now, this is similar to tip number 5, but number 5 was more so about like the furniture and the fixtures that you put into your Airbnb. But the amenities and the experience are things like whether or not you add a hot tub or a game room, or if you do a cool sunken fire pit in the backyard, or a cold plunge and a sauna.
It's all of those add-ons and things that your guests interact with that have an impact on their experience. Airbnb now lets you filter by a lot of these amenities. So do the research to see what amenities are popular in your market that you're thinking investing in and add those to your listing.
And even smaller things like looking for ways to kind of surprise and delight your guests. Ideas like sending a small welcome gift or giving them access to amenities that weren't initially mentioned in the listing, or Instacarting an item over that they asked for but you didn't actually have stocked at your listing.
All of those small things add up. Like imagine it if you were a guest, right? That would be so cute. The fourth category is all about pricing strategies. Airbnbs are different from traditional long-term rentals in a lot of ways, but one of the biggest differences is how your properties earn revenue. With a regular long-term rental, you get a tenant who signs a long-term lease and pays the same exact amount every month.
So with the long-term rental, you know exactly how much money that property is going to generate for really as long as the lease is in place. But with an Airbnb, there's no lease, and every single guest is going to pay a slightly different amount. And people are willing to pay more on the weekends than they are on the weekdays. And people are willing to spend more for the holidays than they are for non-holidays.
Basically, over the course of an entire year, the price for your Airbnb is going to fluctuate a lot. And in order to really maximize your revenue, you really have to tackle these two important things.
So let's get into the pricing tips. So tip number 7 is to use a dynamic pricing tool. Now, if you've been around the channel, you've probably heard us talk about this before, but a dynamic pricing tool is a piece of software that helps you better manage how to price your Airbnb. And when you use it correctly, you should be able to maximize your Airbnb's revenue by increasing prices on days when demand is high and staying a little bit more competitive with your pricing on days when demand is low.
We personally use Price Labs as our dynamic pricing tool, and we'll link to them in the description of this video.
But using a pricing tool is really going to do two important things for your Airbnb. First, it's going to reduce the amount of time you personally spend adjusting your pricing. And second, it's going to bring in tons of data points that allow you to do a better job of actually managing the pricing.
Tip number 8 is to create a comp set. So within Price Labs, you have the ability to create a comp set, which is basically a collection of Airbnbs that you feel are similar to yours. Airbnbs that you're most likely to compete against for a booking.
And the reason the comp set is so important when it comes to pricing is that Price Labs allows you to see things like what price your comp set is charging on any given day. And you can see the occupancy for the properties in your comp set. And with that kind of information, you can make choices around whether you should lower or increase your prices.
So if your comp set is getting a ton of bookings 8 to 12 weeks out, but your Airbnb's calendar is still wide open, then it's a sign that maybe your prices are too high.
And if the opposite is true, where you're booked solid for the next 90 days, but your comp set is only booked out for the next 3 weeks, then your prices might be a little bit too low. So a super strong comp set is incredibly important for nailing your pricing strategy.
And really quickly, I just want to share, we've also got a totally free download for all of our subscribers. We've put together a free tool that helps you analyze properties that you're interested in purchasing as an Airbnb. And you can find the link to that in our description of this video.
Now, the last and final category is all about managing your Airbnb guests.
Yeah.
It's about how you can make managing your Airbnb easier for you while also giving your guests a better experience.
We'll answer that question with the 2 tips for this category, but we just want to reiterate that truly unlocking your Airbnb's revenue potential comes down to being able to give your guests a 5-star experience. And sometimes the property that's worse will outperform the better property because of the management. So here's how to tackle managing your Airbnb.
Tip number 9 is to use a property management software, or PMS for short. Now, there are so many moving pieces when you're managing an Airbnb, and you can create a ton of extra work for yourself if you try and do all of that work manually. But a good PMS will automate a lot of the kind of mundane and repetitive tasks for you.
Things like creating a unique check-in code for the front door for each guest, and then sending that code to the guests before they get to your property. Sending all of your check-in and checkout instructions to the guests. Notifying your cleaner anytime there's a new booking.
Automatically asking your guests to leave a review for your listing, and then publishing your reviews of your guests for you without having to press a button. Right, the list goes on.
Yeah.
But not having a good PMS can add hours and hours of work each and every single week to managing your Airbnb.
We recommend using either Hospitable or Guesty as your PMS, and we'll drop the links to both in the description of this video. And the final tip, tip number 10, is to manage the expectations of your guest. What do we mean by this? Well, part of your job as an Airbnb host is to give your guests a good experience. But that good experience starts by letting your guests know what to expect when they book your property.
Now, we just released a video breaking down our process for getting more 5-star reviews, and we'll link to that in the description of this video. But you have to make sure that the Airbnb that people see in person matches with what they thought they were going to get when they saw your property online. You don't want to catfish your guests, right?
Yeah.
So get photos that really show what the property's like in person. And you want to honestly share the good and the bad about your listing.
What we've learned is that guests don't get pissed off because your property doesn't have certain things. They get pissed off when they thought it came with something, but it turns out it doesn't.
So like we said, just be honest about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like no Airbnb is perfect, so
Right.
share what your guests should know about your Airbnb before they book.
So managing expectations is how you continue to get 5 stars.
No, that's it, guys. Those are the 10 Airbnb hosting tips for beginners.
Woohoo!
And before we go, please connect with us on Instagram. I'm at Tony J. Robinson. My lovely wife is at Sarah Rad Robinson.
Yes.
If you're on TikTok, we're at The Real Estate Robinsons. And again, if you like what you heard in this video and you really want to take your Airbnb business to the next level, book a free call with our team and learn more about our coaching program, Alpha Host Academy. You guys can check the link in the description for that. But you guys get a mix of one-on-one coaching, community content, and so much more. So we'd love to chat with you guys about it if you're interested.
If you have any follow-up questions, please drop a comment below and we'll do our best to answer it. That's it for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm Sarah.
I'm Tony.
And we are the Real Estate Robinsons.